much for the opportunity to come and talk about really some of the work that's going on in global food security at Nottingham, and really to follow on from what Jerry has said. So what I want to do to start with is just introduce the concept of global food security so that we are perhaps aware of some of the key issues, and then the other aspects of the work that we're doing at Nottingham and the work that is going on generally in vertical farming can be put in that context. Clearly, the big issue is this one shown on the graph. The fact that population is increasing dramatically, and that is having major consequences for resources for the world, both in terms of space for people to live, but also for the ability to grow food. It's predicted that by 2050 we'll need to find food for an increase in population by about 50%. So these are significant challenges. Now, if we think about how we've got to where we are at the moment, we think about the Green Revolution and how this was fundamental for increasing yields. So it took something like 10,000 years to reach about 1 billion tonnes of food grain by 1960. We went through a massive leap then. In 40 years, that was doubled by the 2000s. Much of that was because of genetic improvement in terms of the varieties that were selected and agricultural practices. So we can name particular individuals, for instance, Norman Borlaug, who was developing wheat varieties which were semi-dwarf, high-yielding, really responsive. We can also think about it in terms of rice in Nottingham. The development of hybrid rice meant that you've got increased yield of 20 to 30%, and you can feed millions more people as a consequence of it. However, you can see that the effect of such breeding, such lines, in the fact that the point at which hybrids have been introduced, you're getting really increased yield. This is for maize. You've got the United States having an impact first, with China, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa really not showing a significant effect. But the downside of this is the fact that these cultivars are really responding because of things like high nitrogen. So what we're doing is we're putting a huge amount of inputs into the system to get benefit from it. And this has worked really well. It's fed the world up until this point. But clearly, it's not a particularly sustainable aspect. If we look at this in terms of general consumption, you may not be able to see the detail on these graphs, but what you can see is the general trend of upwards. So this is up to 2010. In red at the top, you've got nitrogenous fertilizers and fertilizer in total in blue. The bottom one is showing irrigation and agricultural machinery. The take-home message I'm trying to get across is the fact that huge amounts of inputs are required in the sort of agriculture that we have at the moment, and we have to be aware of that. And we can't carry on increasing along those lines in terms of hitting the goal of increased production in the future. So, these are some of the issues. We also have things like the effect of climate. This is a graph showing the effect of rainfall on GDP growth. And this example is Zimbabwe, but basically the same message holds. Where you are reliant on natural resources, you are likely to have fluctuations, and these can cause massive catastrophic dips at certain times, which may end up with starvation and adverse situations. So you can see where you are reliant on climate, you have these issues. We also have other things that come into the equation of global food security. This is a graph showing corn exports and corn used for fuel ethanol. So this is US corn use details. And of course, a few years ago, there was this explosion of the use of these commodities of maize for fuel. The consequence of that is that there was a looming food crisis, world grain stocks fell, prices of commodities went through the roof. Now, obviously that was a very bad time, very major effects of that. But also, perhaps some good has come from it, in the fact that it's made people think a little about the value of food. The fact that it's not necessarily a commodity that can be assumed worldwide as available. So it's very much brought the idea of global food security onto the agenda and as a key issue for politics. Now, why is there such chronic food insecurity? This is data taken from a Royal Society report back in October 2009, Reaping the Benefits. And it's highlighting the fact that there are a large number of different aspects of issues for this question. You've got things, obviously the fundamental one is increasing population, but consumption patterns. The fact that you've got a requirement for the people in developing countries are wanting to have the same resources that we in the West currently have. So including that is access to meat rather than perhaps grain. So, you know, there is a growing demand for many different aspects of this. Growing demand for replacements of oil, so biofuels, and the impact that that can then have. We've got the problem that we're not making any more land. So the ideas of vertical farming are perhaps extremely relevant to this, is the fact that you may be able to use the resources much more efficiently and maximise what is available. Climate change, as I've pointed out already, is going to be a major issue, and it's going to have a multitude of effects. So when we think about agricultural systems, global food security, what we have is many different aspects all coming together. There is not a simple solution to global food security, which is why perhaps it's such an exciting challenge for a variety of different people, because we all come to it with slightly different perspectives of what is important and what impact that we can have on it. Whether it's at the distribution angle, whether it's at the storage and access to it, or whether it's actually in the production and improvement. So we're all coming in to make this as a whole. So, you know, if we think about, you know, the forecasts, we have to address increased food demand. We have the issue of global population increases. The challenges are very much to combat poor nutrition, but also to increase food production against the background of using less fertilisers, less water, less energy, basically increasing food production in a sustainable manner. And you know, I think some of the things we're going to be talking about this, today will find ways to address some of these in the future. What I just want to do now is to talk a little bit about some of the work that's going on in Nottingham, particularly in the Plant and Crop Sciences division associated with global food security. Now, Jerry has already mentioned the fact that Nottingham has invested in this area for a significant amount of time. It's not that we're coming on this because it's a popular area. We have a good experience over a huge number of years and a huge investment, as has already been mentioned. And of course, we were delighted to be awarded the Queen's Anniversary Prize to represent this one. The sort of areas that we're interested in are diverse, as you would expect in a large group of plant and crop scientists. What I want to do is, in the next few minutes, is just run through a selection of these to try and put these in the context of the issues of global food security. Because one has to remember, of course, that the basis of growing material is the plant material. We may be able to farm it in different ways and different efficiencies, but to be able to maximise the efficiency of those crops requires a fundamental understanding of those commodities. Okay, so just to discuss a few aspects. We have a programme on yield and resource use. based principally around Triticum aestivum, so modern wheat, and basically there is a very limited gene pool for modern wheat. The work that's going on in Nottingham is trying to introduce new traits into this, both in terms of a selection but also for a gene discovery platform. So here we've got the idea of high water use efficiency, high radiation use. The platform, which is headed up by Professor Ian King and Julie King, involves transferring alien genomes into that cultivated wheat, so that we can then look at those variety of traits which may have an advantage for different environments. Maybe in different water environments, different pathogen resistances. The idea of this platform is not only just to generate material, but to be able to access that in terms of the gene identification and understanding of the traits. There's also projects associated with rice ongoing here. This is productivity and stress physiology. I'm not going to talk very much about this because Eric is here and is going to be talking later about some of the other things. But again, it's increasing the efficiency of that plant material so that we can maximise the yield from what's grown. We have other projects associated with biofortification. This is a project based in Malawi by Martin Broadley, where there is addition of selenium to in fertilisers of these maize plants to try and increase the selenium level in the diet. This is part of the sort of global picture of food security in the fact that it's important that the nutrition that is provided is sufficient for people as well. We have a number of programs associated with disease control strategies. This is Rimiana Ray's work of looking at traits for resistance to fusarium, quantifying crop losses associated with soil-borne pathogens, and say strategies for improving yield and forecasting so that you can have very good, efficient use of control methods, so that you can use things at the right time. Another project that's ongoing that particularly may be of interest to people here is that of Matt Dickinson's. Matt does a lot of work on detection of pathogens, of being able to detect in material that's either being brought into the country or grown. Phytoplasmas is one of them. This project, however, is looking at hydroponic systems of recycling water. This is particularly in tomatoes, and the aim is to detect and be able to control potential pathogen build-up in that recycled water. Here, obviously, UV filters can be used to cleanse the recycled water, but they're not always effective. So the strategy here is that of slow sand filtration, so that you get a balanced microbial population, and then you can use that to avoid sort of like bad pathogen build-up. So, this can then be a buffer to the system. Alongside that is obviously the detection requirements to make sure that what you think you have in your system is actually what you have got. So at the level of the array of microbes as well as the concentration. Okay. One thing that we do very well, I think, at Nottingham, is integrate between different setups. We utilise different people's skills to come together to address various problems. And this has particularly been emphasised with the Centre for Integrative Biology. Now this work, 5-year programme to look at the virtual route, but from that there have been a number of other spin-off areas. So each of these are fundamental programmes which are associated with understanding aspects of development, but also integrating it across a range of disciplines. So you can see redesigning root architecture, leaf photosynthesis, pollen development, fruit ripening and virtual seed. So one of these is headed up by Malcolm Bennett, which is looking at redesigning root architecture. A lot of the selection strategies that we've used have relied on looking at what's happening above ground. Very little has really gone on at the below ground level, partly because it's very difficult to do that. The work that has gone on has happened on plates and is not necessarily representative of what you see in soil. The combination of soil scientists and crop scientists and image analysers has allowed the use of X-ray computer tomography to allow the imaging of roots within soil. So this can be done by taking a plant, putting it into the CT machine and then visualising what you see in terms of the root development. So this allows a whole new dimension of study to be possible, so that you can actually see what's happening in the native root structure rather than what you may be seeing on a Petri dish. So this is being used. Information from some of the model systems is being applied across to various crops in different ways. The work that my group's involved in is very much focused around fertility, of trying to maximise the development of pollen, the transfer of that, and also to control this so that you can make hybrids much more easily. So this is taking information from model systems right the way through to a variety of different crops and ornamentals. Other programs I mentioned about seeds. We have the virtual seed, which is organised by Professor Mike Holsworth, and he has work ongoing on pre-harvest sprouting in things like wheat and barley, also in abiotic stress, and particularly sort of exciting work on plant perception to waterlogging and also drought, so areas. There's also work on the various genomes. Graham Seymour was fundamentally involved in the tomato genome project, as shown here, and this is providing a basis for a range of other horticultural crops. We tend to think about the importance of cereals and grain to feed the world, but at the same time, the diversity of diet is also fundamental to provide that variety of richness. So research like this will be sort of fundamental to achieving that. One of the sort of general themes that does apply to a lot of the work that's ongoing in plant and crop sciences is taking traits from one species and in a major crop and then applying them all the way over. So this is being shown by Sean Mays, but is also perhaps reflected a lot in things like the Crops for the Future Centre. We've heard already about this by Jerry. The idea behind this is to provide information, resources and research study on underutilised crops, of taking the traits that they have which may be beneficial in the global sense to either the world in general or particularly improvement and then through to others. So this is, say, the promotion of food security and non-food resources by capitalising on the massive resource that's available. Okay, so my final slide, really just to summarise that what we have is a multidisciplinary approach is required. There are lots of issues to this. It's why it's so exciting and a challenge to us all. What you need is translational research to use the genomic resources, integration across biologists, mathematicians, engineers, imagers, etc. Platforms for gene discovery and application to molecular processes right the way through to the field. So what I hope I've done is set the background for some of the work associated with vertical farming, some of the issues, the challenges, and the future. Thank you very much.
quite tight for time, but I'm going to just, if there are any quick questions to Zoe. Yes.
Kevin Brady, Clayton Zoo. So thank you for your presentation. One of the questions that comes out from that, though, is the interface with the growing environment, and especially controlled environments.
Yeah.
Nottingham used to have a base on horticulture. Do you have any future direction based around the production of controlled environmental agriculture in those environments?
I mean, so we're very interested, obviously, in the effect of environment on the growing conditions. So, from talking from my own research perspective, one of the things that I think is going to be a real challenge is the effect of increased temperature on pollen fertility. The fact that as soon as you start to have increases, in not necessarily continuous, but fluctuations in that, you can lose the production of viable pollen. If you don't have any pollen, you're likely to not get any seed as a consequence. So as part of that, we're interested in studying that under controlled environmental conditions so that then we can take that further and do some of the analyses. So, understanding the physiology of the growth and in the different environments is critical to the general production. So, we do have an array of controlled environment conditions so that we can do those sort of experiments, both in controlled environments and also then taking them out into the field and the effects there.
It's more beyond the field, actually growing in the urban environment, because we don't have the centre of study before.
Yeah, I mean, currently we don't have the facilities at Nottingham for that. Some of that will be probably available through the Crops for the Future and the setup in Malaysia in Oslo. So it may well be somewhere where it goes in the future as a consequence. But as I say, at the moment we haven't got sort of large scale production